I only met Leo last year myself, first time, but his late father, Pat Quinlan, was a friend of the family, and it's a pleasure to have him here in Cavan. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very, very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. Actually, it's my first time in Ballyjamestoff, and I was very impressed when I came in here today. But I know Cavan pretty well. Many, many years ago, I was stationed in Cavan Barracks as a training officer with the FCA and later as commanding officer of the barracks. So it's a bit like coming home in many ways. And it's great to see the guys at the end in the uniforms and the medals and so on. Just nice atmosphere. Thank you very, very much. Okay, I'm going to talk about Jadtaville. When Jadtaville happened, I was 16 years old. I joined the army the next year myself. I won't go into my army career, but you know, so I'm very close to the Jadtaville thing. And many of the men that were in Jadtaville later, I was their commanding officer because they were the same age as I was. You know, so when I was a captain, they were sergeants and corporals with me. They were my age, so you can imagine what they were like in Jadtaville.
Well, here we are this evening in the County Museum in Ballyjamestoff in County Cavan, and this evening there is a lecture on the Seige of Jadotville. Yes, very interesting, the Seige of Jadotville. And to tell me all about that is retired Commandant Leo Quinlin, who is the son of Commandant Pat Quinlan, who fought the Seige of Jadotville. Very interesting, and I know people ask you, what is the Seige of Jadotville?
Oh, well, the Siege of Jadotville took place in 1961 in the Congo, part of the United Nations peacekeeping force that went out there. A company from the Western Command, 155 men, commanded by my father, Pat Quinlan, were sent to Jadtaville on the 3rd of September. They found a very...
There was a reason why they asked for Irish people, wasn't there?
Well, the Irish were...
The Irish...
You mean in Jadtaville?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, there were... Swedes were in Jadtaville a few days before and they didn't like it and they turned around and came back and refused to go out. The Indian battalion refused to send anybody out, but the Irish company were ordered to go out. And consequently, they obeyed the order, they went out to Jadtaville. They went there on the 3rd of September 61 and things were a bit tense. They could see a lot of enemy build up around the place. Military intelligence was very bad. They didn't know what they'd expect out there. But they discovered that they were in the middle of 5,000 of the Katanga army. It was a staging area for the Katanga army. And here you had 155 men in the middle of this type of build-up of enemy forces. 3,500 of that enemy ended up attacking the 155 men.
And when we watched the film The Seige of Jadotville, you actually got a feel of that. The French mercenaries, they were there to mind the mines from was it from the indigenous people?
No. The Katanga, the province of Katanga, the year before, in June of 1960, broke away from the Congo. They wanted independence for themselves because it was the breadbasket of the Congo. It was very rich in uranium, copper, other mines. And in the area of Jadtaville was the centre of a lot of this mining activity.
And of course the governments had been falling and collapsing, there were different powers.
Yeah, well the Congo government was up and down, and the Congolese government was going very communist, and that meant that everything would be nationalised. And therefore Katanga and mostly the people backing Katanga, i.e. the British, the French, the Germans, the Belgians and so on, who were pouring the money in there to the mines, they didn't want to lose all their investment. So they were basically funding the Katanga army. And the Katanga army, who were very well trained, they had jet bombers, they had heavier weapons than any of the United Nations had out there. But also they had mercenaries, hundreds of mercenaries from different countries, and they had regular army Belgian officers left behind by the Belgian government to train the Katanga army. And that's what you had against untried Irishmen as young as 15 years of age.
Yeah, and they called them a virgin army because obviously Ireland as an army had never fought in any wars before.
No, well, not since the formation of the state. And it's worth mentioning that the Battle of Jadtaville is still the single biggest battle that the modern Irish army has been involved in on its own against a foreign enemy.
So you had 155 soldiers.
That's right.
The average age?
Average age was 18 and a half. If you take away the top 8 or 9 who were 30 to 45, the rest of them were 18 and a half average age. 2 of them that I know were only 15. The parents were collecting the children's allowance in Athlone on the Friday that they were fighting in Jadtaville. This I know for a fact. 12 of them, by my reckoning, were 16 years old. Some of them had their 17th birthday as prisoners of war. One young man who was supposed to be 19, I met his brother a few weeks ago. His brother lied about his age. He was only 17, and he did a very brave thing, so brave in fact that he was recommended for the military medal for gallantry, which is the equivalent to the Victoria Cross. He hasn't yet got it, but that's another story. We're fighting to get that.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting time.
So yeah, if anybody watched the film, they'd see. So they landed there in Jadtaville, and the base they were given was an old empty garage, wasn't it? Something like
Not
that?
exactly like you
It
saw in the
looked like-
film, no.
They were given an empty.
They were given buildings that were rented by the United Nations for any UN personnel who happened to go visit Jadtaville for any reason. It wouldn't be a place you would pick to defend. The military person would go for the high ground, where the better field of fire.
But that's where the tactics of your dad come in straight away. You could see when he landed there and he looked around and he sensed dig. They had to dig down.
Yeah.
They knew they might, if they had to defend themselves, that was their only
Well,
way.
I know I'm talking about my father, but he knew what he was doing, right? But so did the others. He had great officers, he had great NCOs and men. He revered the men after Jadtaville, absolutely revered them. They were untried, never in battle before, never fired a single shot in anger before, and yet they were attacked by up to 3,500. And they were the enemy coming, like you saw in the film, it's actually true because I read the reports. They were coming in waves of 600 at a time against a circle, and so when they were coming from one side, maybe 45 men were facing 600 coming in waves. That's actually what happened. So the film is pretty accurate in the battle scenes, except that it went on for 5 days. The film only showed 2 days. But be that as it may, they knew what they had to do. They dug in, they had fields of fire, they had trenches where they should have trenches. And the old story is, you never put men where you can put bullets. So covered with bullets, not with men. And then they had a mobile reserve of 2 armoured cars going up and down. And then they had not heavy mortars, 6mm mortars, which were devastating against the enemy. And then they had Vickers machine guns. But be that as it may, the weaponry they had was totally underpowered compared to what the enemy had.
Yeah. So to get back to the battle, they were on the ground. Their communications with home and Dr. Conor Cruz O'Brien didn't seem to be a right hand with home. Am I unsavvy in saying that?
Yeah.
But that's the impression I get.
Yes, that's the impression everybody got, and the
They
impression
treated
still
a very
exists.
heavy situation very lightly.
Well, it was, from what the history shows, it was at his behest that they put in what they call Operation Mortar. That's in 13th of September, 80 miles away in Elizabethville. The United Nations went to take away the voice of President Seige of Jadotville, i.e. the post office, the radio station, the newspaper offices, to cut out his methods of communication with the province. And that backfired, and that went in at 4 o'clock in the morning of September the 13th, and 3.5 hours later, exactly, they attacked the Irish in Jadtaville in reprisal for the UN attack on them at 80 miles away in Elizabethville. But in Elizabethville, you had about 1,500 United Nations, and you had 1,500 Katanga, we call them enemy. In Jadtaville, it was 20 to 1, 3,500.
Of course, they asked for reinforcements, they didn't get anything.
They tried. The reinforcements people came up and tried on 2 occasions, and they lost 9 men. If I remember correctly, it was 9 men that they lost trying to get across the bridge. The bridge was 80 miles away from Jadtaville. It's called the Lufura Bridge over the River Lufura. But it was very difficult to get across that bridge. A narrow bridge that could be held by 10 men could hold off 100 men. That's what they say. Anyway, they didn't get across, which meant that the fellows in Jadtaville were on their own.
So the battle went on for 5 days. Obviously at that stage they were running out of food supplies, water supplies and possibly ammunition.
They had very little ammunition left, they had no water left. The water was all gone, putrid, that the water that they put into jerry cans and so on, and filled every bath and bottle they could, but because they were in the middle of a housing estate, literally, but very upmarket housing estate, and the artillery bombing coming in, everything had broken all the water pipes, but the enemy had switched off the water to them, switched off all the telephones to them, except for one lady who had a telephone. She stayed there. And then the artillery coming in broke all the sewage pipes, and sewage was leaking into the trenches. The fellows were getting sick, and a lot of them vomiting and diarrhea. And very sensitive, but as some of them told me, we were drinking our own urine. by the time Saturday came, you know, so it wasn't a nice situation.
It was very dismal and no light at the end of the tunnel, really. So what happened in the end? Was there a siege?
There was a ceasefire. Now, it's kind of important to say this. The Irish did not ask for a ceasefire. The enemy asked for a ceasefire. Because by the time Friday evening came, 3 days of battle, the enemy had lost 300 dead lying all around the trenches. They had 750 wounded, according to figures we now know. And a lot of the wounded were there all night long, as I've heard from veterans, crying, screaming, trying to get away, etc. So the enemy asked for a ceasefire because they found it difficult, the officers found it difficult to get the enemy soldiers to keep attacking. And the result was that they asked for a ceasefire, and my father agreed to a ceasefire on certain conditions, and so on. Then he was looking for support, more relief columns or jets to command that never came, things like this. But by the time Sunday came, there was no more help coming up. And the ceasefire agreement then...
They started immediately the enemy started firing.
That's right. Well, no, they didn't, but if they had, everybody was dead. A lot of enemy would be dead, but all the Irish would be dead. So the ceasefire agreement was signed between my father and the Minister of the Katanga government, Minister of the Interior, Malongo was his name, and they came out with their weapons and they went into a hotel. That kind of relaxed prisoner of war situation. But Sunday evening, when the enemy realised, the Katangas realised no help was coming, no jets that were promised were going to come in, all of a sudden, sorry gentlemen, you're not prisoners of war. Weapons were taken from them and they went into 6 weeks of captivity. And that wasn't very nice, captivity. Initially, it was great. They respected them and they praised them and clapping them on the back, good battle, all that kind of thing, which is very surreal when you think about it. And they were going around in the Irish trenches and digging up floorboards in the houses that the Irish had fortified, looking for dead Irish. Couldn't find any dead Irish. Couldn't understand it. 5 Irish were wounded. That's all. And then after a week, they were moved to a place called Colweezy, which wasn't very nice. And they had to build their own walls, barbed wire wall, and they were in there for another 5 weeks. And it wasn't very nice, and they were treated not so well. My dad got beaten up once or twice, and put a blindfold on him and pretended they were going to shoot him against the wall and so on. But they were released eventually.
For the families at
yes.
home, all in were all most of
No, they were at Lone, Mullingar, Longford and Gaul. And there were some from Dublin with the armoured cars and so on. You know.
So that was a terrible time for the family, not knowing what was going to happen,
exactly.
What the outcome would be.
And
so the idea was to keep them as a prisoner of war until when?
Well, they kept them as a prisoner of war for 6 weeks, and peace talks, negotiations between the UN and the Katanga government. And the UN had a lot of prisoners as well, so they agreed to swap the prisoners. And they swapped the prisoners, I think it was about the 25th of October, 6 weeks after they went into captivity. And within a week, the Irish were rearmed, a company rearmed, and back into battle in different things that happened between then and late November, early September, or December, when they went back to Ireland. So, A Company were in quite a number of activities right throughout the 6 months, but the Jadtaville was the biggest one.
And we didn't learn about that in the history books?
No. It's kind of forgotten about. Putting it simply, the United Nations made a mess of the Congo. It wasn't, they broke the mandate. The mandate was to keep the peace, but the United Nations attacked first, therefore enforcing the peace, which broke their mandate. And that and various other reasons, they said, look, forget about it, don't talk about it. And that's the rationale that a lot of us have as to why nothing was done and the whole thing was forgotten about. But then...
Before the tours then to the UN, the fact that all that happened to an Irish troop out there, did the Irish look for any conditions the next time they went out?
No, I wouldn't think so. I was out myself in a few places afterwards, different situation, but and the Irish continued sending people out to the Congo for the next 2 or 3 years. They probably, other commanders going out were maybe a little bit more careful. Who knows? I can't speak for them really.
But when your dad came back and he had the aftermath of that, did he go out on tour again with the UN?
No, he wanted to go on tours. He was picked to go to the Golan Heights a few years later, but somebody else got in there before him and went. and so he didn't. I mean, but he continued in the army. He retired as a full colonel, did the whole 41 years or so, whatever in the army.
And didn't deter you either, you also joined the
No,
army?
no. I joined the army a year after Jadtaville because I was in the FCA during Jadtaville, and I was doing my leaving cert.
You were 16 then?
16. But I was cycling around on a bicycle to all the houses when my mother would get a phone call to say, this is the latest. I dashed down to different housing estates where all the soldiers live, and they're all coming up, the wives are coming running out, what's happening? I would give them the latest news. The worst day in Athlone and Mullingar, Longford and Galway was the Friday of that, because the Evening Herald, if I remember correctly, had it. Company in Jadtaville massacred, officers executed by firing squad. And they apologised 1 year later. But at that time we thought they were all dead. All day Saturday was a terrible day, and then the wives of the officers all came to my mother's house, and we were wondering how would we get religious services, would we ever get bodies back to bury, and so on and so forth. All Saturday night was like that, prayers, all that kind of thing. And then on the Sunday morning, word came, they're all alive, prisoners but alive. I got on my bicycle, cycling around everywhere, they were dancing in the streets, crying, happiness, and so on and so forth. And then right through captivity, the army gave me an old spooled tape recorder, which I still have, tapes, and I went around to all the houses I could, taking messages from the wives and children. This is Sergeant McCabe's wife, this is Sergeant Monaghan's wife, in a big sheet of paper, number 1, 2, 3, 4. Sent it out to my father with the Red Cross, delivered. He brought the men in, played it for them, and taped over it. And a message to me, Leo, number 1 is Sergeant McCabe, number 2, blah, blah, blah. And I go back to the house and play them, you know. So, and I still have those tapes.
And indeed, I would imagine so that in the later years your dad was somewhat of a hero in Athlone, amongst his own soldiers.
Well, certainly, many of the NCOs and men, you know, they revered him, but he revered them, you know, and it was that type of thing. And when he was dying, I remember, it was 878 cancer. In Galway Hospital, quite a few of the soldiers came in dressed up in the blazers, the medals, and the blue beret, and stood at the end of the bed in the hospital, private room, saluted him, said number, rank, the name, saluted him, turned around, marched out, and they all turned up at his funeral and so on.
Well, thank you for talking to us, Leo. As you can see, the hall is filling up there with people all anxious to hear your lecture on Jadtaville. I'd like to thank you for the information that you've given us on this great stuff. Thank you. And it is a part of history, and it's, I must say, as Irish, we should be very proud of that part of history. And I do hope, and I do think, and I definitely believe that those men will be thanked and get their place in the Hall of Fame and in history.
Well, they have been recognised recently, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much for speaking to me on Irish Web TV.
My pleasure. Thank you.